Imagine a land of kingdoms, traders, and epic struggles. This is the story of Nigeria. In this series, we'll explore how history, power, and culture came together to shape the nation we see today. Stay with us, enjoy the journey, and make sure to subscribe so you won't miss a single chapter. In the early 19th century, the city we know today as Lagos, in present-day Nigeria, served as one of the main ports for shipping West African slaves to both North and South America. Although British traders had once dominated this trade, growing pressure from missionary groups and the rising demand for palm oil, used as a lubricant during the Industrial Revolution, pushed the British government to shift its focus. They began competing with other European powers not only to stop the slave trade, but also to secure exclusive control over palm oil and other raw materials from the region. Before this policy shift, trade had been driven for more than 3 centuries by a triangular exchange system. Enslaved Africans were captured and sold by local kings, chiefs, and military leaders to European traders, who then transported them to the Americas and the Caribbean to labor on plantations. There, they produced commodities such as sugar and cotton, which were shipped to European factories and turned into finished goods like textiles, rum, and brandy. These manufactured products, along with items such as firearms, clocks, and leather goods, were then sent back to Africa to be traded for more slaves. Challenging the old system, Britain's new approach centered on keeping African labor within the continent. The persistent demand for slaves along the West African coast had created severe labor shortages inland, limiting agricultural output. The trade also left the region increasingly unstable, as age-old tribal conflicts became far bloodier with the introduction of European-supplied guns and cannons. Many kings and chiefs sought to expand their influence by overpowering neighboring tribes, leading to frequent raids on coastal towns and villages by armed militias who captured and sold people as slaves in exchange for more weapons. For Britain to guarantee secure and reliable access to the region's resources, the violence and instability driven by the slave trade had to be eliminated. The British began pushing through anti-slavery laws and set up a naval squadron dedicated to intercepting slave ships and returning their captives to land. Yet, the trade continued to thrive, as it remained highly profitable for local players and the Portuguese traders who now led the market. Britain needed a lasting answer, and fortunately for them, a fierce rivalry between 2 Yoruba kings provided just the opportunity. During the 1840s, a fierce struggle for the Lagos throne broke out between Oba Akitoye and Oba Kosoko. Akitoye had been installed as king in 1841, but Kosoko argued that, according to Lagos traditions, he was the rightful heir. In 1845, Kosoko seized power by force, overthrowing Akitoye and driving him and his followers into exile. Though Akitoye had previously accepted slavery, he reached out to the British, offering to sign a treaty abolishing the slave trade in Lagos and granting their merchants and missionaries special access to the region if they would help him reclaim his throne. After a conflict known locally as Ogun Agindingbi, or the Boiling Battle, the British Royal Navy dealt a crushing blow to Oba Kosoko and his force of more than 5,000 men, restoring Akitoye to the throne of Lagos. True to his promise, Akitoye enacted a law abolishing slavery in Lagos and granted the British government and its citizens considerable privileges and authority in the region. As history unfolded, Oba Akitoye passed away just 2 years later, and his son, Oba Dosunmu, was compelled to sign a treaty that officially made Lagos a British colony only 7 years after his father's death. With slavery abolished and Lagos under full British control, Portuguese influence quickly faded, and the city grew into a key hub for exporting palm oil and other raw materials from the surrounding areas. After the Berlin Conference of 1884, the outlines of modern Nigeria were drawn for further European conquest, and Sir George Tubman Goldie's Royal Niger Company was granted authority to secure the territory. By recruiting and arming numerous local militias, the Royal Niger Company launched a campaign to take control of the territory. In just over a decade, it had coerced more than 400 treaties from local rulers, securing their allegiance and granting the company full legislative and judicial power. Having positioned itself as the de facto government over a land of more than 250 ethnic groups and 400 languages, the Royal Niger Company formally handed Nigeria over to the British government on January 1st, 1900, receiving £865,000 in compensation. As a side note, the Royal Niger Company still exists today as part of Unilever plc, the multinational behind brands like Ben & Jerry's, Lipton, Dove and Vaseline. Acknowledging the sharp cultural and religious differences within the territory, the British initially split it into two protectorates: Southern Nigeria, which was mostly Christian, and Northern Nigeria, which remained largely Muslim. Southern Nigeria proved highly productive, running a budget surplus thanks to its abundant natural resources and its people's openness to education and trade. By contrast, the North was a financial burden, costing the British more to govern than they earned from its raw materials. Historians suggest that these struggles stem from both its limited natural resources and the region's strong Islamic traditions, which resisted secular education. Facing an urgent budget crisis in northern Nigeria, British High Commissioner Frederick Lugard decided to merge the two very different regions into a single political entity. Despite protests from many southern Nigerians, the two protectorates were combined in 1914, forming one British colony called Nigeria, which would eventually become the Federal Republic of Nigeria we know today. Interestingly, many historians credit Lugard's wife, Flora Shaw, with naming the country after the Niger River that runs through the territory. In many respects, Nigeria was never truly a Nigerian idea. Rather than being a homeland for its people, it was created as a corporate entity designed to facilitate the profitable extraction of natural resources from the lands surrounding the Niger River. Almost 60 years after gaining independence from Britain in 1960, Nigeria still appears to function according to the purpose for which it was originally created. The main difference is that instead of enriching the shareholders of the Royal Niger Company, the country's resources now primarily benefit Nigeria's elite. With over 37 billion barrels of oil beneath its soil, modern Nigeria may have replaced palm oil with the far more lucrative crude oil, yet the fundamental situation remains unchanged. The only Nigerians benefiting from this wealth are the elites who own the oil wells and the government officials in charge of managing these resources. Despite widespread problems such as a failing education system, inadequate infrastructure, insecurity, and high unemployment, Nigerian politicians are among the highest paid in the world. According to a report by Nigerian news station Channels TV, Nigerian senators earn up to $80,000 per month in wages and allowances. This means they are paid more than 10,000 times the Nigerian minimum wage and over 200 times the country's GDP per capita, all in a nation where nearly 87 million people survive on less than $1 a day. Life has become so difficult for the average Nigerian that for many, simply living anywhere outside the country has become the ultimate goal. To put this into perspective, while roughly 10.5 million Africans were forcibly removed during the 300 years of the transatlantic slave trade, estimates indicate that over 15 million Nigerians have voluntarily left the country since its independence in 1960. From traditional destinations like the US, UK and Canada to places such as Russia, Ukraine and Malaysia, Nigerians willingly face prejudice, harsh climates and difficult conditions in pursuit of a better life for themselves and their families. Much like the Royal Niger Company and its colonial administrators ran Nigeria primarily for their own benefit within the British Empire. Today's Nigerian elite operate in a similar way, often to an even greater extent. They now serve not just Britain, but the broader Western world. How? Primarily by diverting billions of dollars in oil revenues, which should be invested locally, into European banks, where the money simply sits and accrues interest. They fuel the London property market through endless purchases of expensive real estate, pay enormous tuition fees to send their children abroad while local schools decay, and support European industries with their constant demand for imported luxury cars, clothing, and goods. While they may carry Nigerian passports and publicly express pride in their country, their actions reveal little genuine solidarity with ordinary Nigerians. Yet their mindset becomes less surprising when you consider their background and upbringing. It's difficult to feel any true responsibility toward a country to which you have no real connection. Raised by parents and grandparents who found little in common with the hundreds of neighboring tribes forcibly joined together in the profit-driven construct called Nigeria, today's Nigerian elites were unlikely to abandon their ethnic biases or embrace a united vision for the country just because it now had a new flag, anthem, and a government led by black administrators. A common question is why, nearly 60 years after independence, the Nigerian elite have not dismantled the colonial structures and divided the country along pre-colonial ethnic lines. The answer is complex, but fundamentally, breaking up Nigeria would strip many wealthy and powerful individuals of their influence and wealth. The Biafra War from 1967 to 1970, which cost millions of lives, demonstrates just how far those benefiting from Nigeria's continued existence are willing to go to maintain it. Regardless of its origins, the reality is that the hopes and dreams of over 200 million people now rest on Nigeria's success. Moreover, a growing number of young Nigerians truly identify with Nigeria as their homeland, rather than solely as Igbo, Yoruba, or Hausa. Many speak Nigerian English as their first and sometimes only language. They rarely understand or revere the historic traditions of their parents, instead identifying more with an emerging contemporary Nigerian culture, a culture shaped by the growing music, fashion, and film industries, an evolving shared language, and a collective struggle to succeed despite adversity. For these Nigerians, the country is far more than a money-making enterprise. It is their sole homeland, and they continue to hope for a future led by visionary and just leaders. Yet, given the ethnocentric upbringing of the current elite and their years managing the neo-colonial exploitation of Nigeria, expecting substantial change under their leadership may be unrealistic. The question that remains is, will the next generation of Nigerian leaders be any different? That's the story, simplified and summarized. Please like, share, and subscribe. And until next time.